I'm Melissa Palmer from the Mid-Atlantic Center of the Arts and Humanities, and I'm here to present Native American folklore in a very unconventional way. This is not the library. This is Education Central. This is not Education Central. This is my home base, and I have a different cat. I think I did the intro to this with Leo. This is Guster. Guster's going to help me talk about some folklore with you today. And I'm going to share some stories from the beginning of creation to some of our superstitions that date back 10,000 years. You know, our Native American ancestors and the people who preceded us, you know, this isn't 100 years that they precede us. This is thousands to 10,000s of years that these people have lived here, especially in the Americas. Especially our Lenape, the first man, they were here not 1,000 years ago, but 10,000 years ago. And hello, there's Leo. What's really interesting is these stories really color the Western view in ways that we did not know were possible. And there was my phone. But before we get started, I'm just going to tell you that there's going to be a little bit of me, and then there's going to be a little bit of video, and then there's going to be some animations. Like I said in my intro on the Facebook page, I'm trying to flex our tech muscles during this time, you know, making lemonade out of lemons. You know, we have the lemons in that I can't see you in person. But the lemonade factor is I get to try to do some new things that we never did before. So what I want to start with is some creation stories, and hopefully with the benefit of technology, you won't be staring at me the whole time. We'll be cutting to some beautiful videos, although, you know, you will get to see some cats along the way. The creation story is really interesting to me because it goes back thousands of years, and it is a story that transcends multiple tribes throughout the United States. So that's the Lenape, even on the East Coast, and as far out as California, our Western tribes seem to share this consistent view of this turtle god down through New Jersey and even south from us, the Delawares. And they were our first people, and a lot of their mythology, that's who I'm going to be borrowing from today because they are closest to my heart, and they're closest to Cape May. Their remains are in Cape May. King Nummi, if you are from the Cape May area, you can see the King Nummi campground. His footprint is still very much here. Go down Indian Trail Road, you go down Route 9, that is quite literally the footpaths that were laid down by Lenape people. So I try to talk about the Lenape as much as possible. But without further ado, I'm going to talk to you about creation, because what better way to begin than at the beginning? Here we go. After the great spirit and creator of all, he who creates us by thought brought the world into being. There came a time very long ago when the animals were living in deep water with no dry land. They grew weary of being wet and wanted to find a way to bring up the mud from under the water. From the greatest to the least, each one dove under the water. One by one, they tried to dive deep enough to bring up some of the mud. And one by one, they failed, being able to dive so deep and so long. It seemed as though none could bring up the mud from the bottom. All came back to the surface, gasping for air. It seemed an impossible task, for none was willing to risk their life to bring up the mud. Finally, after all the others had tried and failed, humble Muskrat took his turn. Muskrat dove deep and was under the water for a very long time. The other animals feared that Muskrat had drowned, for he stayed below the water much longer than any of them had. When Muskrat finally came back up to the surface, he was exhausted and close to death. The animals saw that there was a clump of mud scraped from the bottom of Muskrat's paw. Humble Muskrat had risked his life to dive deeper than any of them had in order to bring the mud up from the bottom. He who creates us by thought summoned Turtle to the surface of the water and placed the mud from Muskrat's paw upon the back of Turtle. He who creates us by thought caused the mud to grow, covering Turtle's back. As Turtle continued to raise his back, More water drained off, and the mud that grew and grew became dry, becoming the land. And the animals had dry land to live upon. One day, in the middle of the land, upon Turtle's back, there grew a tree. From that tree there grew a shoot, and from that shoot sprouted a man. The man would have been all alone. But then the tree grew another shoot, and from that shoot sprouted a woman. Also of note, most North American, Native American folklore, much like many of the parables that we see in Western culture and in Western religion, are parables or allegories of some kind. So we have a story of a small character who maybe learns a lesson that can be applied to everyday life. This is a way for spiritual healers, leaders, and teachers to pass along stories and lessons to people of the tribe. Some of them caught on and were taken literally. And again, much like American folktales and parables and tall tales, they took on a life of their own, and they became much grander and widespread stories. I've got Hopper out here to help me talk to you a little bit about one of my favorite Native American symbols, and that is dogs. Dogs usually play the role of loyal helpers and friends of men in Native American folklore, just as they do in most other world mythology. Native American folktales have to do with the proper treatment of dogs. Again, I keep kind of hammering the fact that Native Americans worship nature and appreciated nature. So animals represented in most Native American folktales and stories are going to be revered and respected. They're not going to be villains. People abuse, disrespect, or annoy dogs are usually harshly punished in Native American tales, which, again, rightfully so. These legends reflect the high esteem that many tribes held dogs in. When you think about tribal living, your security system is going to be people, but it's also going to be the animals that surround you. So these animals would warn if there were intruders, they would warn if there were other animals encroaching on the land, they would also warn against fire, they would also warn against weather phenomena. And anyone who has a dog can tell you, dogs really do have kind of like I'd say a spidey sense, but it's really like a doggy sense. They know when trouble is coming. So Native Americans across North America, they tell tales of dogs, but dogs they are held in very high regard. The dog is a symbol of several warrior societies of the Great Plains, such as the Crazy Dog Society and the Crow Tribe. To the Cheyennes, the dog represents fierce guardianship and self-sacrifice, and anyone who has a dog knows that. There's no greater loyalty than a dog. Okay, this next story I really like because it explains the origins of the crow, who I very much enjoy. And you're also going to see that there are some common threads between this story and another story of someone who flew too high and, burnt his wings and maybe gave fire to the common man. And it's interesting because if you're familiar with mythology, you know the story of Icarus and you know the story of Prometheus, and in both of those tales you kind of have a negative outcome for someone who overreaches and gives fire to the masses. And the Native Americans have a really interesting take on that, and I have, of course, this is pretty widely distributed among tribes throughout North America, but of course I kind of lean toward the Lenni Lenape. So the version that we're going to be using is from the Lenni Lenape archives, and it's a story called Rainbow Crow. And again, you won't be staring at me. Hopefully we'll be cutting to some like super cool graphics right about now. Long, long ago, before our Lenape ancestors walked the earth, the weather was always warm and the animals lived in happiness. Then one day, the earth suddenly became cold and white. Sparkling flakes fell from the sky, covering the earth with its white softness. The animals, seeing snow for the first time, were not afraid. Soon, the snow grew deeper, and Axboquez the mouse disappeared. All that could be seen was the tip of his tail, and the other animals began to get worried. Then, Kemamess the rabbit disappeared. All that could be seen were the tips of his ears, and by now the animals were really worried. So the animals met in council, gathering together in a clearing deep in the forest to discuss the situation. They decided that what was needed was for a messenger to travel up to the home of the Creator and ask him to stop the snow. They asked among themselves who was willing to make such a journey to the 12th heaven, that distant dwelling place of the Creator. Well, Pink, the possum, said the owl is the wisest. Perhaps he should be the one to go. But no, the animals whispered. He might get lost in the light of day, so Owl shouldn't go. Then the beaver said, perhaps the raccoon should go. No, the animals argued. He might follow his tail instead of his nose, so raccoon should not go. Then the skunk said, perhaps the coyote should go. No, the animals shouted. Coyote is clever and loves to play tricks. He might chase the clouds or swallow the wind, so Coyote should not go. Then the animals made all kinds of noise. They screeched and howled, hooted and growled, because they couldn't decide who should make the journey to the dwelling place of the Creator and ask him to stop the snow. In the meantime, the snow got deeper and deeper. The small animals climbed on top of the taller animals so they wouldn't disappear. Just as the animals were in their greatest despair, from the top of a tall tree, the rainbow crow flew down among them. In the sweetest voice they had ever heard from a bird, Rainbow Crow said, I will go. I will go. The animals were so happy to have a messenger that they sang many songs of praise to him. Then Rainbow Crow flew high up into the sky above the snow and the wind, beyond the clouds, the moon, and the stars. For 3 days he flew until at last he arrived at the 12th heaven, the dwelling place of the Creator. But the Creator was too busy to notice him, so Rainbow Crow began to sing. Upon hearing the singing, the Creator stopped to listen. Never before had he heard such a sweet voice singing or such a beautiful song. Upon seeing, the Creator said, such a gift of song as you have given to me, I now give a gift to you. Tell me what you would choose to have. Rainbow Crow knew that far below on the earth, the snow was getting so deep that soon all the animals would disappear. So he asked the Creator to stop the snow. The Creator replied, no, I cannot stop the snow, for the snow has a spirit of its own. When the snow spirit leaves the clouds to visit with his friend the wind spirit, the snow will stop, but earth will still be cold. So Crow asked the Creator to stop the cold, but the Creator said, no, I cannot stop the cold. All I can do is give you the gift of fire. Fire will keep you warm and will melt the snow so that your friends will be content until warm weather returns. The Creator picked up a stick and set it on fire by sticking it into the sun. Then he handed it to Crow, saying, I will give you this gift only once. Now hurry, fly back to the earth before the fire goes out. Off flew Rainbow Crow. On the first day, as he was flying down to the earth, sparks from the fire burnt and darkened all his tail feathers. On the second day, the fire burned brighter and the stick grew shorter, and all of Rainbow Crow's feathers became blackened with soot. On the third day, the stick of fire was so short and the fire so hot that smoke and ash blew into his mouth, and his voice became cracked and hoarse. Caw, caw, he croaked. Upon returning to the clearing in the forest, where the Creator had left the other animals, they were nowhere to be seen. Only the tops of the tallest trees were above the snow. So Crow flew down close to the snow and around until he went until the fire had melted the snow and his animal friends were safe. The stick of fire that Rainbow Crow had brought to the earth as a gift from the Creator, became the grandfather of all fires. And for this, all the animals gave thanks to him. They danced and sang songs praising Rainbow Crow. But Crow flew alone to a distant tree where he wept, for now he was no longer beautiful and could no longer sing sweet songs. His rainbow-colored feathers were gone forever. When the snow spirit emptied the clouds and joined the wind spirit, the snow stopped. Crow was still weeping. No longer was he Rainbow Crow, but just a plain black crow. Alas, Crow is what he has been called ever since. Now the Creator heard Crow in his despair and came down from the sky. When he saw Crow, he said, "Soon man will appear on the earth. He will take the fire and be master of all but you. For being so brave and unselfish, I now give you the gift of freedom. Man will never hurt you, for your meat tastes like fire and smoke. Man will never capture you, for your beautiful voice is now crackly and hoarse. Man will never value your feathers, because your rainbow colors are now black, but your black feathers will shine and reflect all the colors. If you look closely, you will see." Crow looked, and he saw many tiny rainbows shining in his black feathers, and so he was satisfied. The Creator returned to his dwelling far above the sky, and Crow returned to his friends in the forest, happy and proud that he was now just a black crow with shining feathers full of tiny rainbows. I love that story. Don't you? I like that story very much. Now, what's really interesting to me is I love Greek mythology and Roman mythology, and I love that idea. It's kind of a paradoxical, or there's a paradigm there, in Greek and Roman mythology. It's, oh, you have fire, or you fly too close to the fire, you're going to be destroyed, and everything's going to end up terribly for you, as we learned with Icarus. Prometheus got fire, and he gave it to man, and we know the story of Prometheus. It didn't work out so well for him. For eternity, he had his liver picked out and eaten over and over again. It would grow back, which is really terrible. But in this story, Crow loses his rainbow feathers. His feathers get charred to black, soot-colored kind of, plain black feathers. But he wears that as a badge of honor. Now no one's going to want to steal your feathers, no one's going to want to steal you, and no man is going to try to chase you and take you down for your voice. So he kind of wears that caw with honor, and I really like that a lot. I say this a lot in my Native American presentations, but there's a self-assuredness and a mental acuity in our Native Americans that I think has been underrepresented historically. I think history has misrepresented our Native American friends and done them a great disservice. And I spend a lot of my lecturing time pointing out kind of the psychological awareness and scientific discoveries and even literary impact that our Native American friends had on Western history as we know it. So that's a great story. And now we're going to move on. Hey, don't bite me. Hi. So now I'm going to talk to you about something I'm really excited about, and I'm going to try to keep myself leashed. I have my other assistant here for this one. Can you see him? Say hi, Hopper. Hello. So I want to talk to you a little bit about Native American mythology that's kind of gotten a bad rap, and as a fan of sci-fi and horror, I can attest to this. So the folklore of the shapeshifter has taken on kind of a horror movie sci-fi feel, whereas it has been scarified. Stories of Native Americans shapeshifting into werewolves. Okay, so that's the story that we really borrowed from the Native Americans in the Western world, kind of corrupted the folklore of people who could change into the bodies of animals and corrupted it to make it something scary, whereas really, Native American shapeshifters, it's a story that crosses the Navajo, the Shoshone, the Cherokee, the Chippewa, even the Lenape. Now these stories are about Native Americans who could take on the form of their spirit animal and actually transform into wolves, eagles, bears, something fierce and dynamic. Now these stories have been made kind of scary, and a lot of that has to do with American settlers who came over and took these stories and vilified the Native Americans. But what's really neat is, especially in Navajo tradition, Navajo healers were said to be shapeshifters who could change into the form and take the form of a bear to protect and heal their fellow companions and save their villages. The Shoshone, the Cherokee, and the Chippewa have similar stories. Okay, so you would change into an eagle and you would take on this vision, and you would be a seer. There's Hopper. Hopper says, yes, that's a great story. The Native Americans came in touch with their own instincts through shape-shifting, and this was supposed to be a spiritual elevation. So through dance, through prayer, through meditation, you would come in touch with your spirit animal, and you would actually take the form of your spirit animal. Not horrifying at all. It was supposed to be this transcendent moment. Did it really happen? I'm not sure, but the stories that remain have been made much scarier and less spiritual than they actually are. And I'm going to find some clips of some stories of shape-shifting for you, and I'm going to hit pause so I can make Hopper stop yelling.
Is it so confused?
All right, so I'm out here in beautiful nature, and this is a great setting to talk about our next folklore, and we're going to be talking about the Windigo. Can you see him? Okay, so the Windigo, or the Windigo, who is not a demigorgon, but he is kind of, his body structure is very humanesque like this, and he's also pale. Now the Windigo has become a fixture not only in Native American folklore, but it has become a fixture in Western horror. Stephen King references the Windigo in Pet Sematary. Supernatural has an episode on the Windigo, and even My Little Pony has taken a shot. Say hi, Hopper. Can I see him? Okay. There he is. Has taken a shot at the Windigo. Now, a Windigo is a cursed individual who usually becomes this beast for engaging in some kind of taboo activity. Now, Algonquin Native folklore is really where the Windigo took off, also in the Pacific Northwest. Now, this beast was said to be a human in the tribe who engaged in taboo behavior and was cursed to lead a cannibalistic, almost vampire-like life. It's punishment for dishonorable or taboo activities such as engaging in cannibalism due to starvation. Now, according to Sean Smallman, author of Dangerous Spirits, The Windigo in Myth and History, it was, quote, a means of defining moral social behavior. Remember what I said about allegory in the past. A lot of these stories and this folklore is meant to teach a tribe and to tell them what is right and what is wrong. So this was, of course, told people, cannibalism is frowned upon, children. Don't eat each other. You'll turn into a Windigo. It was also a warning against greed and selfishness. Now, we've pulled from this as in places like My Little Pony and in Stephen King, and I'm going to, later on during my lecture, I'm going to bring some clips of that out. But just know that Hollywood has, as Hollywood does, exaggerated and grossly misrepresented the original tales of the Windigo. The Windigo was really supposed to be very human in feature, and now Hollywood has corrupted this depiction and made it truly a Hollywood monster, something that looks more like this. There's inaccurate depictions. Popular depictions of the Windigo as a ravenous animal have also been displaced. The original emphasis that the indigenous people placed on the Windigo as a lesson on human greed. So this parable that was supposed to teach people don't take from others, don't take other people's food, don't eat other people, has become kind of corrupted and turned into a monster movie. But we're going to get more on that later. So that's my take on the Windigo. Bye. Get outside, by the way. It's really nice.
Hey, so we've got half a chance in the daylight. And I, for one, want to kill this evil son of a bitch.
Well, hell, I'm in.
Wendigo is a Cree Indian word. It means evil that devours.
They're hundreds of years old. Each one was once a man, sometimes an Indian, or other times a frontiersman, or a miner, or a hunter.
How's a man turn into one of those things?
Well, it's always the same. During some harsh winter, guy finds himself starving, cut off from supplies or help. becomes a cannibal to survive, eating other members of his tribe or camp.
Like the Donner Party.
Cultures all over the world believe that eating human flesh gives a person certain abilities, speed, strength, and mortality.
If you eat enough of it, over years you become this less than human thing. You're always hungry.
So if that's true, how can Tommy still be alive?
You're not gonna like it.
Tell me.
More than anything, a Wendigo knows how to last long winters without food. It hibernates for years at a time. When it's awake, it keeps its victims alive. It stores them, so it can feed whenever it wants. If your brother's alive, it's keeping him somewhere dark, hidden, and safe. And we gotta track it back there.
And then how do we stop it?
Well, guns are useless, so are knives. Basically, we gotta torch the sucker.
The Windigos! That's just a heartwarming Eve story. Creatures made of wind that spread cold and misery across the land to punish ponies? Seems pretty real to me. Let the Pegasi deal with this. There's nothing we can do except hide.
That's enchanted wind. We can't control it, and we can't rely on those snooty unicorns for any help. Build up the cloud bank. We'll try to block it.
What about every pony down below?
They're on their own. We all are.
Fortify the shields around the School of Magic. We need to protect ourselves. It's all we can do.
So as promised, this is our last video. Just know that there are so many other tall tales and folk tales and Native American myths that we could talk about. The coyote, the raven, the tricksters, the scary stories, the love stories. I didn't even get into the love stories and the ghost stories. But I wanted to culminate with this particular tale because it ties together little bits and pieces of all the other kinds of things that we were talking about so far. So you're going to see a little bit of creation. You're going to see a little bit of villains, a little bit of good guys, a little bit of nature, and it's all going to come together in the end. And I'm sorry, look, a wreck, and I don't have any pets to keep me company this time. But thank you for sticking with me, and I hope you enjoy this last one. Now our last story is going to talk about, oh, hello, Guster. Our last story is going to talk about why wars broke out and why the Native American tribes were broken apart, and why eventually and how they found peace again. And I talk about this a little bit in my Native Americans of the Jersey Shore talk, and I'm going to get into it in greater depth here. So I will just jump into this, and we're going to learn about wolves and turtles and the bear tooth. The Lenape believed that before creation, there was nothing, an empty, dark space. However, in this emptiness, there existed a spirit, their creator. Eventually, in that emptiness, he fell asleep. While he slept, he dreamt of a world as we know it today, the earth with mountains, forests, and animals. He also dreamt up man, and he saw the ceremonies man would perform. Then he woke up from his dream to the same nothingness he was living in before. The Creator then started to create the earth as he had dreamt it. First, he created helper spirits, the grandfathers of the north, east, and west, and the grandmother of the south. Together they created the earth just as the Creator had dreamt it. One of their final acts was creating a special tree. From the roots of this tree came the first man, and when the tree bent down and kissed the ground, woman sprang from it. All the animals and humans did their jobs on earth until eventually a problem arose. There was a tooth of a giant naked bear that could give the owner magical powers, and the humans started to fight over it. Eventually, the wars got so bad that people moved away and made new tribes and new languages. The Creator saw this fighting and decided to send a spirit down to bring everyone back together, Nanapush. He went on top of a mountain and started the first sacred fire, which gave off a smoke that caused all the people of the world to come investigate what it was. When they all came, Nanapush created a pipe with a sumac branch and a soapstone bowl, and the Creator gave him tobacco to smoke with. Nanapush then told the people that whenever they fought with each other, to sit down and smoke tobacco in the pipe, and they would make decisions that were good for everyone. The same bear tooth that caused a fight between two evil spirits, a giant toad and an evil snake. The toad was in charge of all the waters, and amidst the fighting, he ate the tooth and the snake. The snake then proceeded to bite his side, releasing a great flood upon the earth. Nanapush saw this destruction and began climbing a mountain to avoid the flood, and all the while grabbing animals that he saw and sticking them in his sash. At the top of the mountain, there was a cedar tree that he started to climb, and as he climbed, he broke off limbs of the tree. When he got to the top of the tree, he pulled out his bow, played it, and sang a song that made the water stop. Nanapush then asked which animal he could put the branches and the rest of the animals on top of in the water. The turtle volunteered, saying he'd float and they could all stay on him. And that's why they call the land Turtle Island. So you see the connection between all the turtle stories, always with the turtle. Nanapush then decided the turtle needed to be bigger for everyone to live on, so he asked the animals if one of them would dive down into the water to get some of the odd earth. The beaver tried first, but came up dead, and Nanapush had to revive him. The loon tried second, but its attempt ended with the same fate. Lastly, the muskrat tried. He stayed down the longest and came up dead as well. But he had some earth on his nose that Nanapush put on the turtle's back. Because of his accomplishment, Nanapush told the muskrat he was blessed and his kind would always thrive in the land. Nanapush then took out his bow and again sang, and the turtle started to grow. It kept growing, and Nanapush sent out animals to try to get to the edge to see how long it had grown. First he sent the bear, and the bear returned in 2 days, saying he had reached the end. Next he sent out the deer, who came back in 2 weeks, saying he had reached the end. Finally, he sent the wolf, and the wolf never returned because the land had gotten so big. The Lenape claimed this is why the wolf howls, that it is really a call for their ancestor to come back home. So again, that's a different take on the creation story. It's an extended version of the shortened story that we heard. But again, you get a broader look. There's always an explanation for where animals came from. And this is something that we see in Western mythology. This is something that we see in Roman mythology. And it's no different in Native American folk tales. Now, what's different in Native American folk tales is that Native Americans believed across the board that there was life in animals, there was life in inanimate objects, and there was life in the nature around us.
So that does it. Sorry. This is Lily. She's here to sign off. I just want to thank you so much.
Hello.
Just as our Native Americans passed on their stories to their next generations, and their generations told their stories to their next generations, I'm kind of keeping with that tradition. Signing off with my little friend here, and thanking you for learning all about these wonderful stories. And I hope that you pass on some of these tales to the people that you love. Stay safe. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you for supporting us, and everyone be well.